When usually making these videos, I like to start by asking myself a question. How does a game do something, or why doesn't it do another thing? Then I make the video and some research in order to answer that question. This is a formula which, in my opinion, works really well for conveying information, and yet, this particular video is gonna be slightly different. When I was coming up with inspiration on what to talk about on my next game design video, YouTube just happened to recommend me someone's playthrough of PT, or Playable teaser for now unfortunately cancelled game of Silent Hills. Now I remember back when this came out, I was absolutely taken aback by how much effort they put into marketing of this game. Call it what you will, it may have just been one of the most impressive, if not the most impressive teaser or playable demo, if you will, that I've ever seen. And I think it would be an understatement to say that it really got me hyped up for the game, which has unfortunately since been cancelled. Now what's interesting that for a piece which is arguably kind of short compared to your regular game on length, there has been a lot of disagreement when it comes to player base regarding its design. Is it good or is it bad? Well, in my opinion, the only way to honestly answer this is to look at both sides of the argument and see if we can come out with a conclusion. Well, today I will be looking at PT, a game where great design meets bad design. Now I personally like to start from the top with the good stuff, so let's start with the good design, and luckily there is no shortage of that when it comes to PT. This is a game obviously made by people who understand what makes horror. You walk through the same hallway which repeats over and over with only slight changes in it, somewhat giving the players the feeling of comfort and knowing your familiar areas, and yet creating confusion by constantly changing things around you. Every time you walk through the hallway, things are going to be slightly different, and this plays perfectly into removing the player empowerment and giving you that feeling of uncertainty as to what's actually happening around you. The design of the insides of the house is splendid, both visual and from the level design perspective. The corridors are narrow, thin, there are dark windows, the lighting is fairly good in the beginning but quickly begins to deteriorate. There are even places which are never accessible and yet present this haunting constant presence, such as the upstairs, for example. This plays into the dynamic of exploration which you might not expect in a piece like this, and yet whenever a door opens, for example the bathroom, for the first time, you are really keen and excited to see what is inside and probably equally terrified. The attention to detail is immaculate here. Take a look at, for example, how at any given point in the game, your back will almost always be facing something you don't want it to. There's no point inside of the house where you could safely face a corner and just stare inside. Almost at every point it's going to be either a window, a hallway, or a door right behind you. It's this kind of attention to details combined with the beautiful visuals and great sound design, which can get really disturbing in some points, which leads to so many people praising this game for what it rightfully deserves. It is masterfully crafted, especially when it comes to the first half, or, well, depending on how long the second half took you, could be less than that. Now this is where we come to what a lot of people would refer to as the bad design parts. This thing has been out for a while, you can't even play it anymore, so I don't think there's any pain in spoiling it. But this game takes you through a couple of very difficult to solve puzzles. Now the problem with these, for a lot of people, is that they are incredibly non-intuitive. See, when it comes to game design, a nice way to think about it is that a designer should always be like this small little genie sitting on your shoulder while you play, whispering into your ear what you're supposed to do. So you see, when you accomplish something amazing in a game, it feels like you just did something great and it's all your accomplishment, even though that thing has been designed for you to feel that way beforehand. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is how design is meant to be, right? It gives you that great, satisfactory, warm feeling that you accomplished something really cool, and you feel like you figured it out yourself. The problem with the design of puzzles in PT is that there is nothing of this sort found in there. The puzzles require quite the ridiculous schematic from the player to be completed in order for you to be able to progress through the game. You need to follow a very specific set of triggers and commands in order to, well, get through the experience and finish the demo to get the big reveal of what game this is a trailer for. It is so difficult in fact that a good percentage of players who have played the game have actually never gotten through this part and simply ended up with them walking through the endless cycle of hallways, never getting to the end of it. And whereas with most games, this is where you could easily draw the line of, this is bad game design, that is not the case in PT, because a lot of fans retaliate by saying, well, this is exactly what the developer intended. See, if you look into what the developers actually wanted to do with this experience, they wanted to put it out there, and they wanted to give the players a challenge to solve. Have them at their wits' end trying to figure out what this is supposed to be, possibly taking them weeks to get into the big reveal of what game this is actually teasing. Now obviously, players being players, it only took a couple of days, but the idea was not lost on them. And this is where a lot of people draw the line. So is that actually great game design because it did exactly what the developer intended? Or is it bad game design because most players found it frustrating and were unable to get through it? Unfortunately, the real answer here is there is no direct way to tell. To a large portion, that depends on your separate point of view. My personal opinion is that it didn't take away from the experience from the first half, which was, in my opinion, still the better part of the game, and it did exactly what the developer intended. So how I would conclude it is that it is a very deliberate bad game design which works out perfectly. But obviously, the decision of whether you like it or not is always for you to make. So let's quickly recap this video. PT, or Playable teaser for Silent Hills, is definitely a game where great design meets what some would call bad game design. From the good part, we get a lot. Immaculate game design when it comes to inside of the house, prompting confusion, supporting people's phobias, and presenting this relentless wall of terror and freakiness which comes at you from every direction, while still prompting that sort of mystery and aspects of exploration with parts of the house which are inaccessible, such as the front door or the upstairs. This is further supported by a wonderful audio design with great music and pretty good voice acting on the radio side of things, together with one of the best looking horror experiences I have seen on consoles up to this point. When it comes to the bad side of things, a lot of people would argue that the puzzles, especially in the later game, are incredibly tedious. They are not obvious at all and are not conveyed to the player in a way that a lot of players would like them to be. However, a lot of people retaliate to this by saying that is exactly what the developer's intention was, and thus this bad design was all done on purpose, which technically makes it great game design. Regardless, whichever part of that argument you stand on, I think we can both agree that PT got everyone hyped for the game, which I think most of us are bummed is not coming out, and has to this point, in my opinion, been one of the, if not the best, playable teaser or demo or whatever you want to call it that I've ever seen in my gaming years. And that is all I have to say for the video, guys. I would be really interested to hear what you think, because it seems like the player base is so split, especially when I read the comments on some of these walkthroughs of PT. It really seemed like people are split on the idea of, is it a good game, is it a bad game, do players just want to have everything handed to them, or is it the fault of the developer? Like I personally stated, that in my opinion, the game is fantastic, if you actually want to call it a game, and together with what the developer intended, I can understand why they made the creative choices they did in the end, and I do not think it takes away from the experience. As always, remember, there is no wrong opinion on the subject, and I would love to hear what you have to say down in the comments. Maybe we could start an interesting discussion on the topic. Anyways, guys, that is all I had to say. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to check back in for more. Now make sure to do more. I wish you all a beautiful rest of the day. and I'm gonna see you all in whatever next video I make. Bye bye.